On the 14th of October, 1066, an English king died with an arrow in his eye, and by nightfall, the ruling class of an entire country had been replaced. Within 20 years of about 5,000 English landholders recorded before the invasion, roughly 250 were left. Everyone else had been dispossessed, killed, or driven abroad. In their place sat perhaps 8,000 Normans. That is the most complete replacement of a national elite in European history, and it happened in one generation. Then something strange happened to the names. In 2013, a study came out of the London School of Economics that should not have been possible. Researchers tracked English surnames of Norman origin: Baskerville, Darcy, Mandeville, Montgomery, through the records of Oxford and Cambridge from the 1200s to the present day. They found those names still overrepresented among the wealthy. Measurably, across nearly 900 years. Meanwhile, the ordinary English names, the ones built from jobs and places and fathers, stayed ordinary for the same 900 years. That is the question this video is about. Not which name sounds grander, but which side of 1066 your family was standing on, and whether it still shows. 20 surnames. For each one, whether it came with the conquerors or belonged to the conquered, and what happened to the people who carried it. Stay with me, because the last name on this list belongs to both sides at once, and almost nobody who carries it knows. If one of these names is in your family, put it in the comments with the county your line comes from. And subscribe before we start, because the names you leave decide what I cover next. Number 1. The name Baskerville. Pure Norman. The family came from Beauchamp in Normandy and appears in the Domesday Survey holding land in Herefordshire within 20 years of the invasion. They were border lords on the Welsh March, which meant near-permanent low-level war and near-permanent royal favour. 9 centuries later, the name still appears in the Oxbridge registers at rates far above its share of the population. It also gave Arthur Conan Doyle a title, which is why most people have heard it at all. Number 2. The name Darcy. From Arcy in Normandy, and the family that carried it turns up at nearly every hinge point in English history. A Darcy witnessed Magna Carta in 1215. Another was executed in 1537 for leading the Pilgrimage of Grace, the northern rising against Henry VIII's break with Rome. The name stayed in the gentry so consistently that when Jane Austen wanted a surname that would instantly signal old money and... Number 3. The name Beauchamp. Norman, meaning fair field, and pronounced in England as Beauchamp, which tells you how long it has been here. The Beauchamps became Earls of Warwick and one of the most powerful families of the 1400s. Richard Beauchamp was tutor to the boy king Henry VI and presided over the trial of Joan of Arc in 1431. The English pronunciation is the real detail. A name spelled one way and said another is a name that has been in the mouth of a country for 800 years. Number 4. The name Montgomery. Roger de Montgomery was one of William's closest companions. He did not fight at Hastings. He was left behind to govern Normandy, but he was rewarded with the earldom of Shrewsbury and vast lands. The name went north into Scotland with Norman settlement there, became a major Scottish family in Ayrshire, and from there travelled to Ulster. So an American Montgomery is usually not descended from an English earl. The line runs Normandy, then Scotland, then Ulster, then a ship. 3 moves before it reached you. Number 5. The name Neville. Norman by name, but the story is more interesting than that. The Nevilles descend from Gilbert de Neville, and within a few generations they had married into the old Anglo-Saxon and Anglo-Danish nobility of the north. The families the conquest was supposed to have erased. That is the pattern nobody expects. The Normans did not replace the English population, they replaced its owners, and then they married into what was left of the old blood because that was where local legitimacy lived. Number 6. The name Percy. From Percy en Orge in Normandy and the family that held the north of England as its private frontier. The Percys spent 4 centuries fighting Scots, kings and each other. Harry Hotspur. 2 more Percys were executed for treason in the 1500s and 1600s. That is what a Norman name looked like at full strength. Not a courtier, but a regional power with an army, dangerous enough that the crown eventually had to break it. Number 7. The name Sinclair. From Saint-Clair-sur-Elle in Normandy, and the clearest proof that Norman does not mean English. The Sinclairs went to Scotland, took the earldom of Orkney under the Norwegian crown, and held the far north for 2 centuries. Their chapel at Rosslyn, built in the 1400s, has been attracting theories for 100 years, almost none of them evidenced. Norman families ended up ruling in England, Scotland, Ireland, Sicily and Antioch. They were an export. Number 8. The name Grosvenor. The name means great hunter, from Grosvenor, and the family acquired land in Cheshire, and then, in 1677, Sir Thomas Grosvenor married a 12-year-old heiress named Mary Davies, whose inheritance included some swampy fields north of the Thames. Those fields became Mayfair and Belgravia. The Grosvenor family is one of the wealthiest landowning families in Britain to this day, on the strength of a single marriage 3.5 centuries ago. Number 9. The name Mandeville. Geoffrey de Mandeville, Earl of Essex, is the closest thing the 12th century had to a warlord operating for himself. During the civil war known as the Anarchy, he switched sides between Stephen and Matilda repeatedly, extracting titles from each in turn, and eventually seized Ramsey Abbey and used it as a fortress until he was killed in 1144. The name is on this list because it shows the other side of the Norman. They were armed men in a country they had taken by force, and when central power weakened, they behaved accordingly. Number 10. The name Fitzwilliam. Fitz is Norman French for son of, and it produced a whole family of English surnames: Fitzgerald, Fitzroy, Fitzherbert, Fitzwilliam. One detail worth knowing, Fitzroy specifically means son of the king, and it was the surname routinely given to acknowledged royal bastards. Henry VIII's illegitimate son was Henry Fitzroy. Several ducal families descend from Charles II's Fitzroy children. So a Fitz name is Norman by construction, but whether it means aristocracy or simply a Norman-influenced naming habit depends entirely on which century and which county it appears in. Number 11. The name Godwin. Now we cross the line. Everything from here is Anglo-Saxon, and we start with the family that lost the country. Godwin, Earl of Wessex. His son Harold took the throne in January of 1066 and was dead by October. The name means good friend in Old English. After Hastings, the family was destroyed. Harold's sons fled to Ireland and then to Scandinavia. His daughter married a prince of Kiev, and the earldom vanished. The surname survives all over England today, ordinary and unremarkable, carried by people with no idea it was once the name of the ruling house. Number 12. The name Wulfric, surviving today as Wulrich and Ulrich. Old English names built on wolf were everywhere before 1066. Wulfric, Wulfstan, Wulfgar, Beowulf. Within 3 generations of the conquest, they had almost disappeared from the record. Not because the people died, but because English parents started naming their children William, Robert, and Henry. That is one of the most complete cultural surrenders visible in any historical record. An entire naming tradition abandoned in about 80 years, voluntarily by the conquered. Number 13. The name Smith. the most common surname in England, in Scotland, and in the United States, Old English smitten, to strike. There were smiths in every village before the conquest and after it, and the Normans did not change that. This is the clearest example of the other England, the one that kept working while its owners changed. Every trade name on the list belongs to the same England: Baker, Cooper, Thatcher, Fletcher, Wright, Turner, Miller. 900 years later, they are still the most common surnames in the country, and still nowhere near the top of the wealth records. Number 14, the name Ashford, and every name like it. Place names are the deepest layer of English surnames. Ashford, Bradley, nearly all Old English describing a landscape feature. A ford by ash trees, a broad clearing. The Normans mostly kept the English place names when they took the land. They took the estates but wrote down the English words for them, which is why the map of England is still overwhelmingly Anglo-Saxon, while the men who owned it were not. Number 15, the name Harold, surviving as Harold and Herald. The name of the last Anglo-Saxon king survived, but barely, and mostly in the north and east. There is something worth noticing here. English families kept using Harold as a personal name in the areas furthest from Norman control, and in a country where naming your son after the defeated king was, at minimum, a statement. Number 16, the name Edmunds, from Old English Edmund, meaning rich protection. Edmund the Martyr was killed by Danish raiders in 869 and became the patron saint of England for 400 years until Edward III promoted St. George instead. A French-speaking king choosing a foreign warrior saint over the native English one. The name survived as Edmunds, Edmunds, Edmundson. So did Edwards, Edwin, and Edgar. The Eed names were too deeply rooted to be pushed out entirely. Number 17, the name Kirby and the Norse layer underneath. Before the Normans, there were the Danes, and in the north and east of England, a third of the place names are Norse. Anything ending in by, Thorpe, Thwaite, or Toft. Kirby means church settlement in Old Norse. Add Grimsby, Whitby, Selby, Althorpe, Braithwaite. The families that took surnames from those places carry a Viking layer under the English. That region, the Danelaw, was also where Norman control was weakest and where English and Norse names survived longest. Number 18, the name Cotton and the villain names. Cotton, coats, and coton come from cot, a cottage, the dwelling of a cotter, the lowest rank of tenant in the manorial system. Domesday counts them precisely. Around 10% of the recorded population were slaves outright, and a large share of the rest were villains and cotters tied to land they did not own. The Norman machine that produced Domesday was, in effect, an inventory of people. Those people also got surnames a few centuries later, and they are among the most common English names alive today. Number 19, the name Franklin. Middle English Frankelane, a freeman who held land but was not noble, the English yeoman class. This is the name that explains why the whole story. Below the Norman lords and above the villains, there was a layer of free English landholders who kept their land, kept their names, and quietly built the class that later filled Parliament, the merchant companies, and eventually America. Benjamin Franklin's family were exactly that, English freeholders from Northamptonshire. Number 20, the name Stewart, and the answer to the question I promised. Here is the trick. The Stewarts are usually thought of as the most Scottish name imaginable, and the office the name comes from was Scottish, but the family who held it was Breton. Walter Fitzalan came from Brittany, part of the same Norman-French world that invaded England, invited north by a Scottish king who wanted Norman-style administration. The dynasty that ruled Scotland, Then England, then Great Britain, was founded by a man from the same military class that took England in 1066, which it walked north, married in, and ended up on both thrones. And that is the honest close. The names on this list are not two peoples. They are two positions in a single society that merged over a few centuries. Norman families married English heiresses within 2 generations because that is where land and legitimacy were. English families took Norman first names to survive. By 1400, the aristocracy spoke English, and by then almost nobody could say who had come with the ships. What the London School of Economics study actually found is not that Norman blood is superior. It is that advantage, once established, is astonishingly persistent, that land, education and connections pass down more reliably than anything genetic, and that a head start from 1066 is still faintly visible in the records of the 21st century. So a Norman surname does not make you know. Names were taken by tenants, granted to servants, copied from landlords, and changed by clerks. What settles your line is the parish register, the manorial roll, the will, and testing. Put your surname in the comments with the county your family is oldest in. The names that come up most often decide what I make next. If this was worth your time, a like helps it reach other people carrying these names, and subscribing means you will see the next one.